Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something called the space program. And the space program is our ventures or the world's ventures into space. And different countries had different space programs, but I want to talk to you about the beginning of the space program and also why it started and some interesting occurrences as this program got going. Well, let's go back to after World War II, in the 40s, 1940s. There was the thought that eventually there's going to be maybe another war. People were worried about that, and every country wanted to have the most power, of course, just like they do today, especially us, of course. Well, it was thought that whoever controlled space and who had power to get into space and maybe observe from space and had weapons in space, that was the country that was going to be able to take over. It kind of makes sense. Well, that's how the space program began during the Cold War. So it was mainly, the way this started was mainly between the U.S. and Russia, because those powers were kind of like wanting to kind of get a hand up on each one, a foot up on each one. So it was between us and Russia, and so we wanted to really beat Russia in every way. So if we got into space before Russia, then we're getting there. We're starting our dominance. Well, it turns out that as we go down here, space program, we were going to send up something before Russia into space. That didn't happen. What was launched was Sputnik. Sputnik was the first artificial satellite. It was Russian, sent into space, little tiny little satellite to orbit Earth. Nothing in there. I mean, as far as no creatures, I should say. So Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, and it was Russian. So they beat us. The Russians beat us with a satellite. At least something into space to orbit. They beat us. And something interesting, I don't know if anybody remembers Spud Webb, the basketball player. He was really about 5'5.5", listed at 5'7". Just an incredible athlete. He won a dunking contest, against people that were, up to 7 feet tall. So his grandmother, the way he got his name, Spud, was what I read, is that his grandmother named him after Sputnik. So Spud came after Sputnik. And I read that. I don't know if you care about that, but I always thought that was interesting. Don't worry about this date here. All right. Russians beat us with a satellite. Okay, they won. But we're going to beat them with at least an animal. Get an animal up into space before the Russians do. And by the way, here's the launch of Sputnik right there. Well, it turns out the Russians beat us with an animal. Laika. Laika was the first animal to orbit Earth on Sputnik 2. Now, we became so upset that they beat us with an animal that we called this mission, instead of Sputnik, Mutnik. Like dog, Mutnik. We were not happy. They beat us with a satellite. They beat us with an animal. And it turns out that they didn't tell us this at the time. Not that the Russians usually like to share things with us anyway. But they share maybe more with us now than then. But back then, everybody's pretty secretive. Turns out that Laika did not make it into space alive. I think she orbited 7 times, but she died upon launch, maybe from a heart attack. They're not sure what happened. Maybe just too much. The G-forces were too great for her, but she didn't even make it up alive, unfortunately. And they weren't even planning on bringing her back, so she was not going to even make it back. It was her capsule actually even burnt up in the atmosphere on the way back down, which was their plan. And shouldn't surprise anybody that, animals are being tested on all the time anyway. We test on animals. Animals are the guinea pigs. Literally. And so there are terrible things done to animals. And this is not news that an animal was sacrificed for the good of humans. Happens all the time. All right, so Laika. Good to know Laika was the first animal put into space as far as to orbit Earth, but she wasn't alive. But she still did orbit Earth. All right, and let me just show you this. I was enthralled with Laika when I was a kid. Just the story of Laika going into space, and I remember. And here's a model of Laika's capsule. There would be Laika was like pretty much harnessed in. There's a model of Laika down here in this area, and this is the very top of the rocket. Here's Laika's spacecraft, and Laika would have been right up here. Now, take a look at this, stamps of Laika. I went on eBay and got a stamp just some years ago, because I remember as a kid I had this stamp. I'm just really fascinated with Laika. So here was a stamp of Laika. All right, so they beat us with an animal, even though she wasn't alive, but still beat us. They beat us with the first satellite, Sputnik. So maybe we can beat her with beat the Russians with a person. If we can get a person into space before them, hey, we have the edge then. So we had this Mercury Series getting ready to go. There were 7 Mercury Series astronauts that were going on this one-person missions into space. Now, one of them was going to go up, and if you get a chance, well, you don't have to know their names, but here are the astronauts: Alan Shepard, Gus Grissom, John Glenn, Scott Carpenter, Wally Schirra, Gordon Hot Dog Cooper, and Deke Slayton. Now, if you get a chance and have some time, which you do for a while, watch this movie. I will give you 3 points, extra credit. And again, it's part of the cap. I'll give you 25 points you can do. It's a long movie. It's like 3 hours and 13 minutes, but I'm going to give you 3 points for just writing a paragraph about it. And it won Academy Awards, some great actors in here. I mean, just to mention a few, I mean, some of you may not know some of these people. Some of you will. Scott Glenn plays Alan Shepard. Fred Ward plays Gus Grissom. John Glenn is played by Ed Harris. Gordon Cooper is played by Dennis Quaid. So there's some good actors in here. And they embellish the story a little bit. If we were in the classroom, I'd show you some clips of this movie that I thought were pretty good. But we're not in the classroom. And so I'm not going to show you clips. You can watch it on your own, though, for extra credit, if you want. The Right Stuff. It's a good movie, great movie. And something interesting here. Sam Shepard. Now, in the movie, there was another person that wasn't an astronaut. A person. Well, the character is Chuck Yeager. Chuck Yeager. Now, here's the real Chuck Yeager. Chuck Yeager is famous for, being maybe the best pilot who ever lived. He's the one who first broke the sound barrier in a plane, and he's still alive. Chuck Yeager is something like 96 years old right now, and he's still alive. Well, he was in the movie The Right Stuff, played by Sam Shepard. Unfortunately, Sam Shepard, I think he just died. You might remember him from some movies. But Chuck Yeager, the real Chuck Yeager, was maybe the best pilot. And all these pilots, if they go back here, these were pilots from in the military, Navy, Air Force, Army, Marines, and they were the ones chosen to be astronauts. They were picked from hundreds of people to be astronauts because these were the best pilots we had. Well, by consensus, I think everybody thought that really the best pilot around was Chuck Yeager, but he was not chosen to be an astronaut. And the reason was, here's why, because he did not go to college. So he was not chosen, even though he probably could have made the best astronaut there was. He was probably the best pilot there was at the time. But because he didn't go to college, he wasn't chosen. So the moral of the story is stay in school. Now, of course, I would have picked Chuck Yeager to be an astronaut. And something interesting about Chuck Yeager, he's still alive. And about 4 or 5 years ago, when he was like 90 years old or something like that, he was at a Giants game, San Francisco Giants. I remember watching him on TV. He was there, I think, with his wife. And we had the great seats. They gave him, of course, you need to give him the best seats there are. He's like a hero. Incredible history, and it kind of shows you this: the best pilot that ever lived is a Giants fan. All right, I won't say any more about that. All right, now the astronauts were getting ready to go up and beat the Russians send an astronaut before the Russians. We have the edge over them. But then we sent a chimpanzee into space named Ham. I'll tell you, the astronauts were not happy because they were preparing for this, and then they sent a chimpanzee up instead of an astronaut. Now, the astronauts, the astronauts were probably the bravest people there are. I mean, these astronauts were military people. And I don't agree with fighting in wars and like things like that. I don't agree with wars, but I know that military people are the bravest people there are. I mean, if you're in a branch of the military and will risk your life, you have something I don't have. Those are the bravest people. And these astronauts were military people, so these were brave people. So they were ready to go up, even though half the rockets we were sending up, just the practice missions, were blowing up. They said, "Hey, I got a 50% chance of making it. Good enough for me." I mean, that's like someone in the military now. So these are people that deserve very high respect. These astronauts, military people, deserve very high respect because these people are risking their lives and very, very brave. So then they send we send a chimpanzee up. So this was kind of, the astronauts were not really happy about this. You can imagine. So they said, "Okay, let's go. Let's get someone up here." And I got to mention this. Also in this mission, and even I think some even later missions, there's a great movie to see about these scientists, and the movie is Hidden Figures. And Hidden Figures, I'll give you an extra point just for watching. Don't even have to write anything. I mean, I think I've seen this like 2, maybe 3 times, this movie. And it's about 3 African-American women who were instrumental in helping us get into space. And Katherine Johnson, it's mainly about Katherine Johnson. I mean, they're all of them in there, but in this movie. But I think just a couple months ago, she died. But you got to see this movie. This is a great movie called Hidden Figures, and just watch it. Great movie, and to give you an extra point, just tell Argyle you saw it, and don't even have to do a write up, and you will get an extra point for doing actually like nothing but watching it. I want you to watch this movie, Hidden Figures. And so then we were about ready to get an astronaut up there. But then guess what happened? April 12th, 1961, Russia. Well, they beat us. They beat us with an astronaut into space, the first person into space and also to orbit the Earth, Yuri Gagarin. So it's good to write down Yuri. I mean, at the time, he's famous now. Everybody loves Yuri. He's not alive anymore, but at the time, though, the U.S. hated Yuri because he beat us. I mean, the Russians beat us with Sputnik. They beat us with Laika, and now they've sent a person into space before us. So this is, write down Yuri, the first person into space and to orbit Earth. That's good to know. He's a national hero. Not a U.S. national hero, but a Russian national hero. There was his capsule. And then finally, about 3 weeks later, we said, okay, enough is enough. Even though we're not quite ready to get there, rocket may blow up. Alan Shepard, they all wanted to go. All of the 7 Mercury Series astronauts, they wanted to be the first. But I don't even know how they decided on Shepard. But Alan Shepard, was the first American human into space. He only went up for about 14 minutes. He didn't orbit. He just went up, came back down. But at least we got someone into space. Yeah, we had to. We were getting really far behind with the Russians in the space race. So Alan Shepard, first American human into space. Now, there was a launch of his rocket, Mercury Redstone rocket. I wish I could show you the poster with the rockets and some of these videos I had. Maybe I'll post something for you. There's his capsule, made for one person. The Mercury Series was just one person in each mission. Then what happened was Gus Grissom went up, and there was like a little problem with the capsule sinking when he got back, and he didn't get as much fanfare. And interesting story if you see the right stuff. John Glenn was the first American to orbit Earth. He was the 3rd American to go up. But just what you should know is he's the first American to orbit Earth. Don't worry about the date. John Glenn. And he even went up in the space shuttle, like, what was it, like 30 years later to commemorate, maybe 25, 30 years later, not even 25 years later. But he went up in the space shuttle, got to go up in the space shuttle when he was like 75 years old, just to kind of commemorate this achievement, the first American to orbit Earth. Now, here is an Atlas rocket for that later Mercury missions. What about the first woman into space? It is good to know. She was Russian, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman into space. I think, and I believe she's still alive. So, at the time, this was a major thing. The first woman into space. Maybe not for us because it was a Russian woman, but yeah, I mean, this was pretty big at the time. Today, it doesn't matter who goes up into space. I mean, it doesn't matter what nationality, what's man, woman. Nobody really. I mean, it doesn't really matter today. I mean, but back then, this was a great achievement. First woman to space. So the Russians really beat us with everything. But yeah, that's the way it went. We were behind. So Valentina Tereshkova, good to know. First woman into space. So here's what the thought. Okay, the Russians are beating us in every way possible. But if we can beat the Russians with an actual person or people to the moon, that's saying something. So let's get ready to send someone to the moon. So because even though they've beaten us in every way, they've gotten someone to space, they send an animal up, they have a first satellite. If we beat them to the moon, all right, at least we have some bragging rights. So, but you don't have to write this down. So, before we send people to the moon, we're not going to just send one person to the moon, and probably not. I mean, in one spacecraft, just one person, not even two. We wanted to get 3 people to the moon at once. So we had to get to the moon to see if it was possible to land on the moon and to look for places to land on the moon. So we sent I'm not going to ask you this, but the Ranger program actually purposely crashed into the moon to test the surface. The Surveyor program actually soft landed on the moon to see if anything we landed would sink into this dirt called regolith, this ground, or be able to land and not get pulled down underneath the ground. So the Surveyor did that, and then we sent the lunar orbiter up, and it orbited to take pictures to find the best place to land people. Now, here's some views from Ranger 9 before it crashed into the moon. Lunar orbiter in 1966, the first photo of Earth from the moon. It's a great shot. Moon, Earth. Then we had Project Gemini missions. If we're going to send 3 people to the moon, and in the Mercury series, we only were sending 1 person up at a time, we better at least take a step up and be able to get 2 people into space. So Project Gemini had 2-person missions into space. That's good to know. Project Gemini, 2-person missions into space. Not anywhere else. I mean, just around Earth, in orbit. Ed White for spacewalk. You don't have to know that. And then, now here's something you need to know. Apollo program. This is the one. This is the one that we were preparing to get people to the moon with. And this used the Saturn V, and it looks like a V. It's a Roman numeral 5 launch vehicle, the Saturn V rocket. So this Apollo program had 3 people in each mission. And we did some tests on the ground first and tests in space, but you got to mention this, Apollo 1 capsule fire. Now, if you see a movie like Apollo 13, which you should see, we'll talk about that. I'll give you extra point for that, for just seeing Apollo 13. Apollo 1 capsule fire. And if you saw the movie First Man, I'll give you a point for that, about Neil Armstrong. This was featured in that, too. There was a test on the ground. It wasn't even in space. Of the astronauts that were in here, there was a fire that started. The capsule was locked with a high oxygen environment. The fire spread quickly. They couldn't get out, and they died. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And these astronauts, Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee, you don't have to know this, they were the ones that died in the fire. But the missions went on. They decided, hey, these astronauts would not want us to quit now. They would want us to keep going. So we decided to keep going. And look at this rocket. I wish I could show you the model. I usually bring the models into class and show you. The space shuttle is enormous. Look at the Saturn V rocket compared to it, the rocket that they use for this. I mean, this rocket is incredible. Look at this. This is a real picture of the hangar that it comes from. That's the rocket. This rocket's almost 400 feet tall. I mean, that's some home to center field in most baseball parks, about 400 feet. I mean, this thing, even on wheel, I mean, it has some, this is a little rover, or what is it, a rover with these tracks that takes it around. This thing is incredible. Look at that thing. I mean, you can, these are like, I think those are people down there. You can see how big this thing is. So here is the Saturn V launch vehicle, and this thing is so powerful. It is still, and this is what, 50 years old. This thing is 50 years old, and it is still the most powerful engine, most powerful thrust of any machine we've ever built. So it is the most powerful thing of anything we've ever built, and it's 50 years old. So even like rockets, jet planes today, anything, this is the most powerful thing, the Saturn V launch vehicle. So there it is. I mean, it's just incredible piece of machinery. And there are different parts of it that I'd show you in class, the places where the astronauts are in the command module. And do not write this down if you can even see it. Different parts of it. But now I'm going to stop here. This has been a long one. So I'm going to stop here. I want to talk about the launch of Apollo 11. This was the one. This is the one I want you to know. Apollo 11 launched on July 16th, 1969, and its mission was to send 3 astronauts to the moon. And next time, we're going to talk about what happened. So that is it for now, and we will talk to you soon.